What if the person draining your energy right now isn't someone you hate? It's someone you love? Toxic people rarely look toxic at first, but there are specific signs that reveal who someone really is before they get close enough to hurt you. Things like, they make every conversation about themselves, they rewrite what actually happened, and being around them slowly makes you smaller. There are 6 total. Let's get into the first one right now. 1. They make every conversation about themselves. Not occasionally, every time. You share something, good news, bad news, something that matters to you, and within 30 seconds, the conversation has quietly shifted back to them. Not aggressively, smoothly, almost naturally. You say you got a promotion. They say, "Oh, nice. Speaking of work, let me tell you what happened to me today." You say you're going through something hard. They say, "I know exactly how you feel, because when I went through something similar," and from that point on, it's their story. Psychologists call this conversational narcissism, the habitual tendency to redirect attention back to oneself. One instance means nothing, but if it happens every single time, that's not a quirk, that's a pattern. The test is simple. Notice how often they ask you a genuine follow-up question, not a surface level, "Oh, really?" but real curiosity about your experience. Toxic people almost never do this, because they're not interested in you. They're using you as an audience. And here's what makes this sign so hard to call out. They're often charming while they do it. They're funny, engaging, great at holding a room. The conversation feels alive, until you drive home and realize you didn't say a single thing that mattered to you. That realization, that quiet emptiness, after a conversation that looked fine from the outside, is worth paying attention to. 2. They leave you exhausted, and you're not sure why. After spending time with certain people, you feel lighter. After spending time with others, you feel like you've run a marathon without moving. Drained. Foggy. Slightly worse about your life, but you can't explain how it happened. That feeling isn't weakness, it's data. Toxic people operate at a high emotional intensity. Everything is a crisis, a complaint, or a drama that pulls you in. And when you're around that consistently, you're not just listening. You're doing emotional labor for them, managing their feelings, absorbing their tension, keeping the peace. That's exhausting work, done without being asked and without being thanked. Ask yourself after any interaction, do I feel better or worse about my own life right now? If the answer is almost always worse, that person is costing you something real, and that cost adds up quietly. What makes this even harder to see is that the exhaustion doesn't always happen during the conversation. Sometimes you feel fine in the moment, even good. The crash comes later, an hour after you leave, or that night when you're trying to sleep and your mind won't settle. Your body is processing what your emotions were too polite to flag in real time. That delayed drain is just as significant as the immediate kind. And it's worth noting, this kind of exhaustion is different from the tiredness that comes from a hard but meaningful conversation. Talking through something difficult with someone who genuinely cares can be draining too, but it leaves a different residue. You feel spent but solid. With a toxic person, you feel spent and somehow less than when you arrived. 3. They test your limits to see exactly where you'll bend. Healthy people respect the first no. They might be disappointed. They move on. Toxic people treat no as the opening of a negotiation. They push back, guilt you, act wounded, then bring it up again a week later, framed differently, hoping you've softened. And often you have, because you're reasonable and you don't want unnecessary conflict. Here's what's actually happening. They're mapping your boundaries, learning exactly how much pressure it takes to move you. Not necessarily with conscious calculation, but because they've learned over time that persistence gets them what direct requests don't. Watch for the small tests first. A favor slightly too large for the relationship. Canceling plans last minute, and watching how much you let yourself react. A comment just over the line to see if you'll let it go. Each small test is information. And if you consistently let things slide, they learn your limits are negotiable. The pattern escalates from there almost every time. The particularly painful part of this sign is what it does to you over time. You start anticipating their reaction before you even make a decision. You pre-negotiate with yourself, watering down what you actually want before you've even said it out loud, because you've learned that asserting yourself clearly will cost you something. That internal shrinking, that habit of managing yourself on their behalf, is one of the most lasting effects a toxic person can leave behind. 4. They rewrite history when it becomes inconvenient. This is the sign that can make you genuinely question your own perception if you don't know what to look for. You remember a conversation clearly. They told you one thing. Now, in a new context where that thing is inconvenient, they're telling you it never happened, or that you misunderstood, or that you're being oversensitive about something that wasn't a big deal. This is called gaslighting, and its defining feature isn't anger. It's calm confidence. They don't raise their voice. They look at you with mild concern, like they're worried about your memory, and say something like, "I never said that," or "You always twist things." Over time, you stop trusting your own perception. You start second-guessing yourself before you finish a thought. You pre-apologize for things you're not sure you did wrong. The tell is consistency. Any two people can misremember one conversation. That's just human. But if you're regularly confused about what was actually said, regularly apologizing for things you don't quite believe you did, the problem isn't your memory. Trust that. It also helps to start writing things down. Not obsessively, not as evidence to build a case, just as a way of anchoring your own reality. When you have a record of what actually happened, it becomes much harder for someone to convince you that your memory is the problem. Your perception deserves to be treated as reliable until proven otherwise. And pay attention to how they respond when you calmly stand by your version of events. A person genuinely interested in truth will pause, consider, maybe even apologize. A person interested in control will escalate, getting louder, more wounded, more insistent. That response tells you everything. 5. They're generous in public and withholding in private. This is the most socially invisible sign on this list, and exactly why so many people struggle to get others to believe them when they describe a toxic relationship. From the outside, this person looks wonderful, warm, funny, well-liked. People who know them casually think you're lucky to be close to them. And that gap between their public image and your private experience is isolating in a way that's hard to put into words. Their generosity is a performance. It's about how they're perceived, not about genuine care. Real care doesn't require an audience. A person who is warm when others are watching, but cold when no one is. That gap is the truth about who they are. Stop paying attention to how they treat strangers. Pay attention to how they treat you when there's nothing in it for them. That's the real answer. This sign also tends to make you doubt yourself in a particular way. Because when you try to describe the relationship to someone on the outside, you sound unreasonable. But "they're so nice" is something you'll hear constantly. And because their public behavior is genuinely good, you start wondering if the problem is your perception, your expectations, or something in you. It isn't. The version of a person they show you behind closed doors, consistently, over time, is the real one. One useful question to ask yourself here: do I feel relieved when plans with this person get canceled? That quiet sense of relief, the exhale when you find out you don't have to show up, that's your honest answer about how the relationship actually feels, underneath whatever story you've been telling yourself about it. 6. Being around them makes you smaller. This is the deepest sign, the hardest to name. But once you feel it clearly, you can't unfeel it. You used to say your opinions out loud. Around this person, you've started softening them, or keeping them to yourself entirely. You used to make decisions with confidence. Now, you check what they'll think first. You've started editing yourself. Not your worst impulses, your actual self. Because somewhere along the way you learned that being fully yourself around this person creates friction. That's not a relationship. That's a slow erosion. Healthy relationships expand you. They make you feel more like yourself, not less. They make space for your actual thoughts without punishing you for having them. The people who genuinely care about you don't treat your realness as a problem to manage. When you notice you've become quieter around someone, not peaceful quiet, but small quiet, that is the clearest signal of all. And the most important question you can ask yourself isn't, are they a bad person? It's simpler than that. It's, who am I when I'm around them? If the honest answer is a smaller, more careful, more apologetic version of yourself, that's the answer you needed. Growth in any healthy relationship moves in one direction, toward more openness, more ease, more of yourself. If after months or years with someone you feel less confident, less certain of your own worth, less willing to take up space, that trajectory is the problem, regardless of how much good exists alongside it. Here's what I want you to take from this. Recognizing a toxic person isn't about becoming suspicious of everyone. Most people aren't toxic. They're human, complicated, occasionally selfish, doing their best. Give people grace. But some people, through patterns that are consistent and repeated and quietly costly, will make your life smaller if you let them stay close. You're allowed to notice that. You don't need a dramatic confrontation. You don't need to prove your case. You just need to pay attention to how you feel when you leave, to whether your limits are respected, to whether the version of yourself you bring to that relationship is one you actually recognize. 6 signs. They make it about themselves. They leave you drained. They test where you'll bend. They rewrite what happened. They perform warmth but withhold it privately. And over time, they make you smaller. If you see 3 or more of those in the same person consistently, trust what you're seeing. The people who deserve to be close to you will make that easy to know. Not perfect, but easy. If this gave you clarity about someone in your life, share it with a friend who might need the words for what they've been feeling. And subscribe for more content like this.